thinking it's quite a chilly morning, and we'll warm up in the hall. It's pretty chilly out in here, so hopefully I get heating up a wee bit. So I'm going to talk about Aspire. Thanks to Sir Harry for setting that wide, broad picture. He's a very hard act to follow, so I'll just do my best. This is about the actual implementation of mindfulness, and in particular mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, within the NHS in the UK. So it's not about mindfulness, being used in other settings and in a range of different ways. There's lots of exciting work going on in mindfulness. So my two PhD students here, newly finished. One did research mindfulness in Pullman Prison with young offenders and effects on coherence, amongst other things. Robert looked at mindfulness in patients with MS. Again, found good benefits. So there's a whole range of important, exciting research going on. But today we're kind of focusing on MBCT because that is the one thing that has found its way into national guidelines, the NICE guidelines, and therefore should be implemented within the National Health Service. So that's what I'm going to talk about. The Aspire team was led by Professor Joe Rycroft Malone and William Cookin, and I was one of the co-investigators. This picture of me was taken quite a number of years ago, actually, so I was thinking, oh my God, I've aged a lot in the last 3 years, but it's quite an old photo. And the researchers on the project who actually did all the field work and whatnot, how did I get this to work? Here we go. Are down here, Felix and Helith, who, and Helith was planning to come today, but as Lucy said, due to sort of circumstances beyond her control, she couldn't. So, and it was a study funded by the National Institute of Health Research. That's the big UK funder. So we were pleased to get this funding. So the background, I don't think I need to say much at all about this. We all know in this room that depression is a major public health problem, and that one of the mainstays of treatment is antidepressants, and that other approaches, including MBCT, can be used. And MBCT particularly has good evidence in terms of preventing relapse and recurrence in people who have had 3 or more bouts of depression. Number of studies, the number of RCTs show that it's effective, and it's no more or less cost effective than medication. And the key thing for today really is that it's been recommended, it first appeared in the NICE guidelines for depression in terms of the current depression prevention in 2004. So here we are, many years later, and we were very interested to know how much of this has been implemented. Because if something gets into NICE guidelines, it means it's of a sufficient level of evidence to be implemented into the NHS. We wondered to what extent that had happened. We did have some evidence from pilot work that Rebecca Crane in Bangor and William Cookin had published prior to the Aspire, which suggested that implementation wasn't actually very widespread, despite the NICE guidelines. And they came to this conclusion that even if a psychosocial intervention has compelling aims, been shown to work as a clear theory-driven mechanism of action, is cost-effective, and is recommended by a government advisory body, its value is determined by how widely available it is in the health service, i.e. you have to get it out there if it's going to have an effect. In their study, which was on very limited numbers, the implementation was very patchy. So we were keen to see what would happen. I think today is not just about me sort of telling you all about Aspire. We're also wanting to get time to share learning and discuss how we're all doing in our attempts to embed mindfulness. So there will be discussion time at the end for that, and also over tea and coffee. We used a theoretical framework for the evaluation, which I won't go into a lot of detail in, but essentially this is one of many different sort of implementation frameworks that can be helpful when thinking through why does something get implemented or not. And in this particular framework called Paris, it predicts that successful implementation of a new therapy is a function of the nature of the evidence, the context of implementation, and the process of facilitation. And that evidence doesn't need to be only so-called hard evidence from RCTs. Other sorts of evidence are also very important, as we'll see a bit later. So this was the study, Accessibility and Implementation in the UK, of MBCT. And we did it in two phases. So the first phase was descriptive, where we really tried to stake out through semi-structured interviews what was happening across the UK. And we did this UK-wide. And the sample involved sort of key stakeholder groups, people who we could identify, who could tell us the story of what's happening in MBCT implementation in your patch within NHS services. And then from that we went into a phase 2 part of the evaluation, which was more detailed. We picked 10 sites in the UK and we did in-depth case studies on those geographical areas to find out not just what was happening but why. So to try and develop an explanatory model of why things were being implemented or not, and from this to produce an implementation plan and dissemination. And in fact today's meeting is part of that dissemination, because we're now at the end of the study. Not everything's quite ready yet in terms of toolkits and so on, but we've finished the work and we are just about to submit the final report, which means that we'll be published on the NHL website in the next month or so, I would guess. So these are the sorts of kind of questions we were hoping to answer. It's not straightforward doing this kind of evaluation. It's not like doing an RCT. Our sites were, as I say, initially 40 sites, which are a mix of primary and secondary care, with 68 interviews across the UK, and then these 10 case studies. We chose these case studies purposively. We wanted sites where there was good evidence of MBCT being fully embedded within the NHS, sites where it was partially embedded, and sites where there was really no MBCT being delivered within the NHS. So we had 4 case studies of the fully embedded areas, 4 of the partially, and 2 where there was little evidence of MBCT being available. And we interviewed a whole host of people: teachers, managers, clinicians, commissioners, and so on, service users, referrers, GPs, and so on and so forth. So that's the background, and I'm now going to introduce Helif, who's going to talk you through the actual findings. Hoping this is going to work.